We are live.
Okay, I'll now call the Estimates Committee meeting to order. Roll has been taken. Thank you. Members of the committee, just a reminder that the following rules of procedures apply to meetings of the Estimates Committee. All motions must be moved and seconded. Each speaking opportunity for members is 3 minutes. There are no limit to the number of times a member can speak on the same question. Please go to the February 25th estimate meeting date in eScribe to participate in voting. Members of the committee, are there any declarations of conflict of interest on any of the items on tonight's agenda? Councillor Samwell.
2.C, the Brant County Health Unit budget, as I work there.
Councillor Sluss.
Yes, the John Noble Home budget. I have a family member that works there.
Thank you. Seeing no others. I'll now call on Maria Versace, Director of Communications, Community Engagement and Customer Service, and Matthew Arp, PhD, to present the 2023 City Budget Priorities and Public Engagement Findings. Please note the questions will be held until item 4.1 on the agenda.
Thanks very much, Chair Martin. Good evening, members of the committee. For members of the viewing public, my name is Maria Vasaki. I'm the city's Director of Communications, Community Engagement, and Customer Service, and I'm very pleased to be here to present the results of the 2023 City Budget Priorities Public Engagement Campaign, along with Matthew Arp, PhD and Research Associate at Laurier Institute for the Study of Public Opinion and Policy at the Wilfrid Laurier University Brantford campus. As members of the committee will note from the detailed summary attached to this evening's staff report, Matt conducted a very thorough analysis of the findings of this year's budget engagement campaign that we look forward to sharing with you now. Next slide, please. As the committee is aware, last year we embarked on a different budget consultation approach by partnering with researchers from Wilfrid Laurier University Brantford campus to provide a more research-informed review and analysis of the public's feedback. This was done with the primary objective of enhancing the level of meaningful engagement with residents, and so that the findings were more representative of the community at large and could therefore better help inform decisions of the Estimates Committee, specifically as they relate to the city's operating budget this year. Next slide, please. As a brief recap, the engagement campaign included an updated online public survey on the city's Let's Talk Brantford engagement portal, as well as another random telephone survey with 500 Brantford residents. Based on the feedback from the committee during last year's engagement process, we did update the survey, both surveys, to further explain the objectives of the campaign, as well as better explain the relationship between the city, Laurier, and Chaser. Chaser is the Canadian Hub for Applied and Social Research. They are based out of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and they actually conducted and facilitated the phone survey for us this year again. Next slide, please. The 70-page findings report included on tonight's worksheet is both detailed and extensive in its reporting of the relationship between socioeconomic characteristics and resident preferences across several areas, including overall satisfaction, value, service levels of key programming and service areas, discretionary spending, and the increase or introduction of new user fees. Next slide, please. As mentioned, the changes to the phone script specifically help respondents better understand the relationship between the researchers and the city. It's also, I think, important to reiterate that the randomness of including the phone survey improves both the veracity of the data, as well as ensuring that more residents have an opportunity to contribute to the data collection. Next slide, please. Again, the collection of data is sourced primarily from a random telephone survey to 500 Brantford residents, as well as an online public survey on Let's Talk Brantford that was voluntarily completed by 670 participants this year. Next slide. Now I'm happy to turn it over to Matthew to take the committee through some detailed highlights of the research findings.
Thank you very much, Maria. So what we saw last year compared to this year, there was significant growth in the number of participants in the online survey. We went from 244 last year to 670 this year, 175% increase year over year. And this was primarily driven through a very successful social media and email marketing campaign, which draw about 75% of all participants of the online survey. Next slide, please. If we look at the demographic overview of the respondents of both the online and telephone surveys, more than half of the respondents were college educated, at least college educated. And this is consistent, albeit slightly more than what the expectations from census level data would tell us. Next slide, please. Moving on to the age and gender of respondents of the online and telephone surveys. The age of respondents was in a slightly older direction compared to the census level data, with an average age of 49 respondents. More than half of the respondents identified as female, which is slightly also skewed compared to the representative sample data of the census. Next slide, please. One of the new questions we added this year asked respondents their ward location. So we were able to see a breakdown of both the online and telephone respondents' wards. And honestly, both of which were relatively representative, with the online sample being slightly more evenly distributed, with the third ward being the most represented and the fifth ward being the least. And amongst telephone respondents, there was slightly more variation, with Ward 2 being the most represented and Ward 1 being the least. Next slide, please. When we get into the actual findings about asking respondents about satisfaction and the value that they believe they receive for their taxes, a vast majority of the respondents of the telephone survey, almost 2 out of every 3, were overall satisfied. They provided a 6 or higher out of 10 of city programs and services. Although this is a 5% decrease from last year's survey, and a majority of respondents, almost 3/4, believe that they receive very good or fairly good value for their taxes, which is also a slight decrease from last year's telephone survey. Next slide, please. However, when we look at the online survey, over half of the respondents reported being satisfied, which is a 5-point increase from last year's online survey. And a majority of respondents believe that they receive fairly good or very good value for their taxes, which is also a small improvement over last year's online survey. Next slide, please. When looking at key programming and service areas, the general consensus amongst all service areas in both the online and telephone surveys was to maintain service levels. However, there were 3 notable exceptions that a majority of respondents would like to see an increase, and that is the Brantford Brant paramedics, social assistance and homelessness, and housing. Next slide, please. Amongst discretionary spending areas, there was strong support demonstrated for city parks and trails, the public library, community health and wellness, and the snow windrow removal program. And the only opposition that we saw was with the municipal golf course and the Brantford Airport, although the opposition was larger amongst the online sample than the telephone sample. Next slide, please. And as far as increased new user fees go, at least half of the respondents opposed increasing new user fees for Brantford Transit and Lyft, access to parks and recreation facilities, and street parking. Although a majority of respondents reported supporting increasing new user fees for new development applications and parking lots and use of roads. Next slide, please. I'm going to turn this back over to Maria to describe some additional highlights.
Thanks very much, Matt. So just to reiterate some of the highlights from the data that Matt presented more than half of the telephone survey respondents and half of the online sampled supported increasing taxes slightly or significantly, and respectively increasing or maintaining service levels. And as Matt mentioned, this is a slight decrease from last year's online survey and a 1% increase from last year's phone survey. The numbers also indicate that there is some divisiveness by age group, specifically as it related to service areas of Brantford Police, where older respondents were more likely to be supportive, and the Brant County Public Health Unit, where younger respondents were more supportive. And economic development, the most supportive demographic was between the ages of 35 and 49. And then the third highlight is that the preferred approach was to spend on infrastructure now among telephone respondents as well as online respondents, with 52% of those responding for both coming in at preferring that approach. Again, not an overwhelming majority. This is a 4% decrease from last year's phone survey and a 5% increase from last year's online survey. So with that, that was a quick review of a 70-page report, and I'm sure the committee has some questions if we have some time for that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll deal with questions when we get to this item. First, we have no delegations for tonight's meeting, which brings us to 4.1. Can I get a mover and a seconder to put the motion on the floor? Councillor Sullivan, second by Councillor Samwell. Questions? Well, I'll start us off. Regarding the airport, when the survey was done, was it explained that the airport is not currently subsidized by the property taxpayer?
Through the chair, no, that was not explained in any detail.
Okay. And have you considered putting in a question to see whether people own their own home or if they rent?
Through the chair, we could certainly consider that for a future survey. Is there some rationale as to? Yeah, the situation is when people are renting, they don't think that they're paying property tax because it's included in their rent. So a lot of them are quite agreeable to seeing property taxes increase because they don't see themselves as paying them. So they're all in favor of, yeah, let's increase all services because it's not costing me anything. So if we include that, then it'll give us a better picture as to how many are actual directly paying their property taxes and how many are paying it through their rent. That's a good point. I think we could definitely include that in a future survey.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Councillor McCurry.
Chair, thank you. Through you to Maria. Thanks for that. That's again a big volume of work that you folks put out for us. Similarly to Councillor Martin's comment, might we in future ask people an affordability question on the survey as well? What, how much more can you afford to pay? I don't know how you'd word that, Maria, but I think that might be something of value to future committees that sit here as well as to the taxpayer.
Through the chair, yeah, we could look at that and think about how to position it properly, whether it's through a percentage or a dollar value.
Councillor Sluss.
Thank you. And thanks, Maria. And thanks for the report. Can we put something in there, Maria? We talked about this while the survey was going on. I got calls last year and I got calls again this year asking, why are we spending money doing a survey with some company from Saskatchewan? And it's confusing. And for the people, I understand it because you explained it to me, but people that don't know what we're doing think that we're buying services from somebody in Saskatchewan to take the temperature in Brantford. Can that be built in somehow? And I don't know how you do that, but I think it's important that people understand that. I tried to explain it to the first gentleman. I thought, no, I'll let you do it because you'll do it better than I would explaining what's going on. So if you could do that, that would be great.
Yeah, through the chair. Thanks for that, Councillor Sluss. We did add some additional wording to the script that the phone survey conductors put out there, and it did say that they introduced themselves as being from Chaser, which is the Canadian hub for research. They are located in Saskatchewan, so the phone number would have had that area code, and that is who Wilfrid Laurier University has a direct research relationship with. So that's who needed to be part of this work. But yes, we can absolutely make that amplify that even further next time if we work with them again.
Councilor Carpenter.
Yes, my ward mate's had her hand up for some time yet. I would just like her to speak before me.
Well, we go to people in chambers before we go to people online. So
I know what we do, but the procedural bylaw doesn't say that we go before chambers. That's what we've been doing, but that's not in line with the procedural bylaw. So I would like my ward mate to speak first.
Councilor Hunt.
Through you to Maria. My question is around the phone survey. So 500 phone calls, and I was looking at the age demographics. Is that landlines that we were calling?
Through the chair to Councillor Hunt, I'm going to take a stab at answering that question, and then Matt, by all means, come in and fill in any gaps. So there were more than 500 calls made because folks who agree to participate have to do so voluntarily. So I would say that, maybe even double 500 calls were made. They are not all to landlines. They are to phone numbers that are registered to people who live in Brantford. Is that right, Matt?
Through the chair, yes, that is correct. It's both landline and cell phone numbers.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Councilor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, just a quick question. Of the calls that you made, what kind of research was put into how you were going to reach the different demographics that were out there? Like, were they just random numbers that you just picked, or was there actually some procedure put into it?
Through the chair, I do think that there is an analysis done of the lists based on any former data that they have, saying what the demographics were associated with that number. But I think the primary objective is that it is random, and we find out afterwards what the demographic is. And you'll see that it's skewed a little bit older, and that's because those that are a little bit older are more likely to give of their time to participate voluntarily over the phone. Do you have anything to add to that, Matt?
I would just say that there is some work we can do on the back end as far as weighting the data, so that if you have less respondents of a younger demographic, you can weigh that data to amplify those voices to try to make it a more representative sample. And we did do that with some of our analysis in the report to try to offset some of the age disparity with the data.
I'd also like that maybe we should look at also trying to find a way of balancing out what type of financial households we're reaching, so that we're not just sticking to one type of grouping, where we need to get the word of everybody, not just a select few. Thank you.
Councilor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, we funded this research, did we not?
Through the chair, yes, we did, Councillor.
And do you have any? Do you remember the cost?
Yes, the Finance Committee approved the cost to move forward with the partnership. Again, it was approximately $20,000.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, having said that, and to Councillor Sless's question, could they start out by saying, hey, we're calling on behalf of Brantford, doing research, as opposed to this view that we're calling from Saskatchewan? Because I heard the same complaints, the concerns. Well, why would it be answering somebody from Saskatchewan? Why would it be using them? We know why, but when the public hears that, a lot of times they just hang up because they think, well, we're not sure this is actually real, because why would someone call me from all the way from Saskatchewan to ask about Brantford? So you probably got a lot of hangups on those. At least that's what the constituent called me. They said, I just hung up because, in this day and age, nobody knows what's real on social media or on the telephone anymore. Thank you.
Councillor McCurry.
Chair, thank you again through you. The Councillor Carpenter's question reminds me, Maria, of an inquiry that I had from a constituent. CRTC allows the phone call to show the city of Brantford's main number, I believe, right? As opposed to the Saskatchewan number.
Through the chair, I'm not sure about that. I think I'd have to double check that.
Let's check on that. I think that is the case. And it could also, it could indicate city of Brantford in our phone number, and that probably would go a long way to alleviating the angst that folks get about answering phone calls from Saskatchewan, thinking it might be the Rough Riders calling with ticket offers, right? I know that makes a lot of Cat fans uncomfortable. Do you know approximately how long it takes for a call? I looked at the transcript and it's quite lengthy.
Through the chair, I think it's 20 minutes to half an hour.
Okay. How much of that time do you think is some of the wordy questioning?
Through the chair, I would be speculating, but I think most of the time is spent on reading back the question to make sure that the participant understands it and answering any questions they have.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, seeing no further questions, following up on Councillor McCurry's comments. I know telemarketers and scammers can set whatever number they want to show in the call display. I'm sure that we can do that as well legally and have it look as though it's a Brantford number that's calling. So something that would help a lot with probably get you more responses, people willing to first answer the phone and second willing to talk. So it might speed up the whole process if you do that.
No, it's a very good point. If we can do it, I think it'll go a long way to building that trust right from the onset.
Yeah. Okay, with that, we'll call the question.
The motion to receive the budget priorities carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Sakoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Celeste, Martin, McCurry, Hunt, Carpenter, and Samwell.
Okay, we'll now ask Joelle Daniels, Director of Finance, to present to the committee.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Martin and members of the Estimates Committee. I'm very pleased this afternoon to present to you today an overview of the 2023 preliminary operating budget. The development of this budget has been a very large corporate-wide effort, and I want to thank all departmental staff, CAO Hutchings, the entire senior management team, as well as our finance team for their dedication shown throughout the development of this budget. I do just want to start off by saying that the taxpayers of Brantford should be confident that the city's finances have been managed in a fiscally responsible manner. In January of each year, the province releases its financial indicator review, which looks at various sustainability and flexibility indicators that are derived from the annual financial information returns that are submitted by all municipalities in Ontario. Brantford is rated low risk in all the categories that are provided and is performing well against other South Region single tier municipalities in many indicators. I'll just go over what some of these indicators are. If I can get the slide to switch. Oh, there we go. The indicators include, firstly, a look at the average municipal property taxes per average residential household, for which Brantford is just slightly higher than that of the average of the other South Region single tiers. But as a percentage of median household income, we are on par with the others at 5.3%. Brantford also has a lower percentage of outstanding taxes receivable than the other single tiers in our region. When it comes to debt burden and annual debt servicing costs, Brantford is quite low compared to others in our region, both as a cost per household and as a percentage of revenues. Our discretionary reserve balances are higher as a percentage of expenditures, meaning we do have greater flexibility to respond to unforeseen events. But our asset consumption ratio is also higher, meaning that our assets are slightly more into their life cycle on average than other municipalities in the South region. Next slide, please. So I'll just go to the numbers now. Next slide, please. So I will say first that the city is not immune to inflation, which rose on average 6.8% in 2022, the highest level that we've seen since 1982. Taking that into consideration, it's obvious that the costs of all goods and services are increasing, and meaning that many of our expenditure line items are seeing unavoidable increases as well, resulting from this high inflation. However, staff did put a strong focus on revenues in the development of this budget, and I'm happy to share that the preliminary operating budget increase, net of assessment growth, and inclusive of the budget impacts of the local board approved budgets, is overall a 2.62% increase for 2023. Next slide, please. During the last term of council, we were asked regularly during the estimates process to proportionately allocate the new tax revenues from assessment growth between the boards and the city services portion of the budget. And this was done to highlight the portion of the overall increase that city staff is directly responsible for administering. So if we were to proportionately allocate the assessment growth between the boards and the city with this budget, the city controlled portion of the budget represents a 1.58% increase net of its proportionate share of assessment growth. The overall budget, though, including the boards, is increasing 2.62%. Which would also translate into an average residential tax levy increase of 2.62% as well, or $90. But Brantford does have an approved tax ratio reduction policy. Excuse me. And that policy sees tax ratios for the business classes reduce if there's growth in those classes. And in 2022, all the business classes saw growth. And that is shifting $31 to the average residential property, making the average increase 3.53%. The average assessed value of a residential property in Brantford is $285,000. And it is important to note that assessed value is not market value, and the assessed values of properties in Ontario remain at 2016 levels. Next slide, please. So even with the impacts of ratio reduction, a 3.53% average residential tax increase is almost the lowest that's currently either been approved or is currently being contemplated by councils in other single-tier municipalities in the South region. From this slide, those municipalities with the asterisks, which includes Norfolk, Chatham-Kent, Guelph, and London, they have given final approval to those budgets, and the remainder are still currently in deliberations. Next slide, please. So this slide summarizes the key drivers on this budget. This slide actually deals just with the key drivers of the city controlled portion of this budget. So the red shading is indicating pressures on this budget, which is largely related to inflation and annualization of 2022 needs. And the green shading is indicating where reductions to the budget have been made. And these reductions are largely related to increased revenues from a variety of sources, including investment income, supplementary taxes, and user fees. And there will be opportunities throughout the budget worksheet to review these key budget drivers in more detail at a departmental level. Next slide, please. Do need to touch briefly on COVID-19 and the continued impacts that are still creeping into the 2023 budget. So while most city services have largely recovered from the COVID-19 pandemic, the city is continuing to see a slower return to normal in both transit ridership and users of aquatic and fitness services. Both of these areas are expecting to return to pre-COVID levels for 2024. So instead of taking a one-time hit to the operating budget in 2023, of just over $953,000, staff has included in this budget to bring in from the Casino Legacy Reserve some of the provincial COVID-19 grant funding that was received by the province in previous years that was largely utilized to replace lost casino revenues. Next slide, please. Next, I'll just briefly touch on unmet needs that staff are requesting through this process. Next slide. So staff has identified 5 requests for the committee's consideration that are in addition to the current staff or service levels that are currently in the base budget. So these requests do not form part of the base budget. The combined tax supported total of these requests, if they were all to be approved, would add $238,145 to the levy. And there will be opportunity through the worksheet to deliberate and provide direction regarding each of these requests on the commission specific nights for which these requests relate. Next slide, please. So just to show how this would impact the budget overall, if those needs were to be approved, these requests would increase the city controlled portion of the budget to 1.78% and 2.75% overall for the city, still well below what is being seen in most other municipalities, single-tier municipalities, especially in the South region. Next slide, please. So just to move on to next steps, next slide. Tonight's meeting begins with the 2023 operating budget worksheet. And tonight, the committee will be working through all the budgets submitted by the city's boards and agencies. On Wednesday, the worksheet will continue and we'll be deliberating budgets from the CAO's office, fire department, people, legislative services and planning, the executive and legislative budget, as well as the community services and social development non-cost shared budget. On February 15th, the committee will continue with the worksheet, giving consideration to the budgets of the Public Works Commission and the corporate financing budget. And that will take us to the end of the worksheet. There is a placeholder currently in place and has been scheduled as an additional night if needed for February the 22nd. And the budget is currently scheduled for final approval by City Council at its regular meeting on February 28th. Next slide, please. This is my last slide. I do just want to finish up with this slide to speak briefly to how we're looking forward and moving into transitioning to multi-year budgets. So it is expected that this will be the last single year budget process, with 2024 anticipated to be the first of a new multi-year budget process. This is a significant change from the current approach, but one that has been successfully adopted in many other mid to large size municipalities in Ontario and throughout Canada. It does come with many benefits that we're quite excited about, and staff will be scheduling workshops with members of council soon to introduce that concept and walk through how a multi-year budget process could work here in Brantford beginning in 2024. Next slide. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Davis, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Joelle. Joelle, in years past, we had an extra night where there was almost a statutory hearing before we adopted the budget. Why don't we have that in the schedule?
Through you, Chair Martin to Mayor Davis, that special night was a part of a resolution of council from years past, and it was called the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. And that would provide for a special meeting in the event that the budget was above the current rate of inflation, or where the cumulative budget increases seen through a term of council combined exceeded the cumulative rate of inflation during that council term. So at this time, we're expecting that this budget is going to be below the current rate of inflation and would not be required to have a special meeting to adopt it.
Okay, and then tonight we're looking at the outside boards and commissions, and they're generating a property tax increase that's much greater than the city-run operations that we control. So what options do we have tonight to send those budgets back with a note? Please look at it again and sharpen your pencils. How do we do that if we were so inclined to do that?
So at each step of tonight's worksheet, as we move through the boards and agencies budgets, there'll first be a presentation, and then there's an opportunity for both questions or motions to be made with respect to those budgets. I think it would be appropriate if there was such a request to be made to amend the budget, that the request would be such that the applicable board would be requested to consider what is being proposed, and that they would report back.
All right, and they're free to ignore the request.
In most cases, the board is free to ignore the request, and then it could come back to council with approval or not. And depending on what board or agency it is, there's some flexibility in some budgets for the estimates committee and council, and for others, it's not as flexible.
And for example, tonight we have police services. What's the legal arrangement in respect to police services?
Well, I would certainly look to legal to provide a legal opinion, but I can certainly provide the finance interpretation.
What's the general practice? Let's put it that way.
Of this would be that the police services board is responsible for approving a budget and presenting that board to council. Council can approve the budget. They can't change the budget. They can't direct the police services board on how to spend. The only opportunity would be from past practice, could be to provide a reduction, but then the police services board has every right to dispute that through a resolution process provided for in the Police Services Act.
I've probably gone past my 3. Can you put me down again? Thanks.
Councillor McCurry.
Chair, thank you. This question regarding the summary, and perhaps no one may have this at hand, but we see that there's an assessment growth of $4.5 million. Do we know what our total assessment is?
Through you, Chair Martin, to Councillor McCurry, that the total value of the assessment base? I will have Pat answer that question for you.
Good handoff.
Pat Telfer, manager of revenue and a tax collector. So our total assessment base is approximately $13.4 billion. And that's all assessment in the city, including exempt assessment for every property.
I thought that was going to be a research assignment, Pat.
Thanks for the heads up.
What percentage of that total assessment does 4.5 million in new assessment represent?
0.03%.
0.03. Okay, that's quite a bit different than 2.62%. Thank you for that. Now, with respect to our year end, what's our year end cutoff for all departments, outside agencies, and contractors for 2022 entries?
Through you, Chair Martin. So with respect to accounting entries on the city's year end, most of the deadlines to allow for items such as invoices to be paid, accrued receivables, accrued payables, those kinds of items to ensure revenues and expenses are completely recorded for, was just this week or this past week. Finance then needs to go through all of those accounts, because we do have certain finance policies that see surpluses or deficits be balanced against reserves and reserve funds. With respect to boards, we are not privy to any board activity. We don't see any year-end results from our boards until it's time to consolidate into the financial statements. That is an activity that won't happen until late March at the earliest, to be able to provide financial statements to the Finance Committee either in May or June.
Outside agencies, we write them a check. Is that a simple way to describe it?
Yes.
Okay. So by what date would you anticipate then that we would have the final unaudited results of the 2022 year end?
I would expect typically our process is to provide a preliminary look at those unaudited numbers to the Finance Committee in March, with final numbers coming through, like I said, either in May or June.
Is there an opportunity to advance the finalization of the preliminary numbers?
Through you, Chair Martin, it's really difficult to be able to say. There are a lot of accounting entries that need to be done. We've got about 8,000 line items with budgets and actuals, and going through our due diligence and ensuring that we believe everything has been properly apportioned to the year, and then being able to balance those certain items that are either rate supported or otherwise fall under finance policy 2, and balancing those off. It is quite a time consuming exercise.
Now we've got the year to date numbers in a column on our budgets. If you were to add up all those amounts, would we be describing the total expenditure for 2022, and that there might be some cross charges, or would you say that the results aren't all in, the dollars aren't all in?
I would definitely suggest the results are not all in. They were as of January the 30th when that document was prepared, and would probably add to a very large number because interest allocations to reserve funds haven't been done yet. True ups for our rate supported areas haven't been done yet. And that is why we also included 2021, because it is reflective of the last complete year of actuals we do have.
Okay, Councilor Carpenter.
Hey, Mr. Chair. And Joel, thank you for your report. And and thank you for including the assessment growth in the boards, as well as breaking it out as a percentage of the budgets. Because in the past, we've heard members say that we did our job, but the boards didn't do their job. And when the assessment was all attributed to the city side, and I felt that unfair. So now you've fixed that. So I really do appreciate that. Now going forward, we're still looking at 2.62% until we bring in the tax ratio adjustments. Are we mandated to implement those tax ratio adjustments which transfers taxes from the commercial, industrial sector and multi-residential sector over to the residential taxpayer? Can we not enter that and stick to the 2.62% as opposed to the 3.53%?
Through you, Chair Martin, I will start and then I might turn over to Pat as well. Ratio reduction is not something that's legislated per se. It is a current council policy that those ratios be reduced when growth is seen in those classes in any given year. There is certain legislation that Pat might be able to speak to further if you want more information. We can't increase the ratios to the business classes. So the only thing we can do is keep them the same or reduce them.
Yes, because once they're reduced, we cannot increase them. And our goal is to get to 1.5%. So, of what the residential tax component is. And the logic, I think, if I remember then, was that we would the business classes and the multi-residential, those are businesses, and commercial are businesses, and they're they're paying their taxes before they write them off on their tax year, and the public doesn't get to write their property taxes off anywhere. So that was the logic to not make them 100% equal. So is the answer that we could forego any tax ratio adjustments for this year and keep the tax rate down to 2.62% as opposed to 3.53%?
Yes, the
Okay.
committee could decide to do that. It also did that last year as well.
So we've done it before, and it could be done again until we see the banner year with all the apartments going up that we've got on our list. Okay, when Pat talked about the $13.4 billion assessment value, is that 2016 numbers?
Through the chair, that is correct. Yeah, that'd be all properties valued at a date of January 1st, 2016.
Yeah. So when you said about the assessment increase for $4.5 million was 0.03%, how did you break that back down into 2016 numbers?
Well, what the question was it what was the 4.4 million as a percentage of the 13.4 billion? There's a little difference in those numbers, whereas the 4.4 is actually tax dollars,
right?
And it's an increase in the tax dollars, so the tax base to the city. The 13.9 billion is the assessed value of all the properties. So if we looked at the increase of the assessment values that converted into the assessment growth of 4.4 million, there was, I think, $363 million of assessment growth in assessment dollars that created that $4.4 million of assessment growth dollars.
Thanks, Pat. I appreciate that. I just wanted to get that clarification. I didn't want public to have any different ideas. The other one I would like to raise is the unmet needs. There's a number of unmet needs there that are also not in the base budget. Will increase the budget, I think, to 2.75. If I'm reading what I wrote down here from what you were talking about. And those particular assessment increase, can we offset those? In fact, Joel, I think you had a couple of suggestions, $200,000 more in investment and increasing the gapping by another $200,000. Would those offset those if we did those things? Offset those unmet needs being requested here?
Through you, Chair Martin, I should just clarify, I have not made any further recommendations to those line items as part of this budget. We have included significant, very, I would suggest significant increases to those revenue line items already in the budget. I certainly wouldn't be recommending to increase those more at this point in time. So I'm not sure where that information came from, Councillor Carpenter.
Yeah, Councillor Carpenter, your time.
I must have read it wrong. Yes. Okay. We'll keep everybody at the same time.
Yeah. Councillor Sless.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The shifting of the tax burden from the commercial and industrial onto the residential, like you said, is city policy, not mandated by the province. But the province did mandate that we attempt to achieve a range of fairness, correct? I think that's the term they used.
Yes, that is correct.
Are we close? If we stay on our same trajectory we are now, when would we hit that range of fairness?
I'm not sure we could suggest that right now. It is largely dependent, like I said, on the amount of growth that would be seen each year in the classes, and that does vary significantly from year to year. But Pat might be able to identify where those ratios are at now compared to what our target of 1.5 is.
Sure, through the chair. So we've got our three business class tax ratios: the commercial tax class, the industrial, and the multi-residential tax class. The ratio, I'll go through each one of them. Tax ratio for commercial, is currently at 1.7457, and we're reducing it this year to 1.7. As was mentioned earlier, the target range for us is 1.5. So it's 1.7 versus 1.5. We might get there in a couple more years with good years of assessment growth. The industrial is currently our highest tax ratio. It's at 2.25, and we're reducing it to 2.2. And the multi-residential tax ratio is 1.86, and we're reducing that to 1.8. So the commercial and the multi-res are the closest to our targets of 1.5 for the tax ratio. The province's range of fairness is it maxes out at 1.1. So that's where they would like to see us get below is 1.1. And as Councillor Carpenter said, our target or the target set by council is 1.5.
And that 1.5 is really, that's an arbitrary number.
Well, there was some thought that went behind it, and that it's for the business community, they get to write off their taxes, their property taxes on their income taxes. So the equivalent of after income tax property taxes is 1.5 versus 1 for a residential property owner.
Okay, thank you. Then the assessment in the expansion lands, those folks are on a cumulative sliding scale, or I guess it's an increasing scale of paying to the city their property tax. What year are we in that program?
Well, the expansion lands was in 2017, January 1st, 2017. So we're into our 6th year. I think it maxes out by the minister's order at 15 years. I think we did an estimate back in 2017 that it would probably take around 12 years to have all the boundary land property owners at the city rate. That may or may not happen. We've had several years of no increases in assessment, which kind of drive that tax rate for them. So we may end up at the 15-year max. So after 15 years, they automatically go to the city tax rate.
Okay, so we're close to halfway there.
We're about halfway there, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, my final question on that was on the same subject. How much additional, and I think maybe you just answered that, but I'll ask it again. How much additional did we collect this year as opposed to last year from the expansion lands? Is there a significant growth there?
I'd have to look. I don't have those notes with me today. We reduce. There's three components to the whole boundary agreement, and part of it is compensation back to the county, and part of it is reduction or increase in taxes to the boundary property
I was just
owners.
concerned with the tax portion.
I'm gonna guess. I'm thinking it's around $300 every year, but that's definitely a guess. I'd have to look it up, and I can get the number back to you for a Wednesday.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Before I go to second time speakers, I have a question. For the multifamily, is there not two different rates? I think any buildings built after a certain year, it has to be at 1.
Through the chair, that's correct. Yeah, it's 1.1. Their ratio is automatically set at 1.1 by the province. That's the new multi-residential tax class. And a new multi-residential property is any residential property that has more than 6 self-contained units. So any new ones that are built now come in at 1.1, a tax ratio of 1.1. And then we have several older properties that are driven by this, we just call it the multi-residential class, and they're driven by the higher tax ratio that we're reducing through this policy.
Okay. And to be fair, actually, we should probably reduce that one to the same 1.1 so that it's the same for all multifamily eventually.
There's an argument to say that, yes.
Okay, thank you. Mary Davis.
Yeah, along the same line, the tax ratio. Can you pull up page 98 of 100 from the eScribe report? Is that possible? It shows the impact of these tax ratios. Yeah, it's page 98 of 100. It's step 1 opening motion page. 1.B, the starting point. Yeah, there it is. You can just scroll down. All right, so this is where we see the impact. And so we have the overall increase in expenses after deducting assessment growth. That's 2.62%. And then with this tax ratio policy, it brings up the residential rate to increase 3.53%. But you see average commercial tax is 0.93, average industrial tax 1.13, and average multi-residential 0.02. And also Mr. Chair, there was an impact last year. The province reduced the education tax rate for certain business tax categories. And that generated for some a 10% tax savings. It's not even reflected in this. So I have a request, Mr. Chair. This is fairly complicated, but staff in the past have given us some pretty good reports showing where we were at with ratios before this whole policy began many years ago, what progress we've made, and also how we now compare with other municipalities in terms of tax fairness. Can you please update that and distribute that? Is that possible, Patrick? I think you were the one who did the report.
I can do that. Yes, I think it was a comparison of tax ratios with all the, I think it was the KPMG tax or comparator municipalities.
Well, they included that, but you also explained the policy and where we began, like where these ratios were at 9 years ago when this began.
Yes, I can update that.
Okay. And one other thing, in order to fully understand what the tax load is of these other tax classes, and we don't see in the information just given the impact of the province's decision on the education tax rate, can you give us, for comparison purposes, taxes paid for 3 of the top 10 industrial and commercial properties where their assessments remain the same, and showing the actual total taxes they paid in 21 and 22? Because I think 21 was when they were still paying the old education tax rate. Maybe you can do it 20, 21, and 22. Is that possible, Mr. Chair? So that we fully understand exactly who's been paying what and what various tax groups are currently paying, considering everything that's included in their tax rate.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, and it was the 2021 where they reduced the education taxes. They got the benefit of the reduced education taxes, but I can do those comparisons. Yes.
Yeah. Can you go back then to 2020?
Yeah.
Okay. One last request I have is there was some mention made of the casino money making up for amounts that were previously caught or paid with transit, and it was the aquatic. And that was, I think, your last slide, Joelle. Can you pull that up again, please?
Yeah. It should be coming up very shortly. It was slide 9. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't understand when you went through it. Are you saying that the 953,620 we're using to offset that's money from the casino legacy reserve, but really those monies are in there as they represent COVID-19 monies paid to us by the province? Did I get that right?
Yeah, through you, Chair Martin. Yes, essentially that is correct. We did receive COVID funding from the province because we were able to generate some of our own efficiencies through the COVID, through the city's work from home model and some other initiatives we took. We were able to use quite a bit of that funding received to replenish our casino reserve and to replenish the money that we were short from the casino being closed. So what this is suggesting is that we're going to go back and access some of that grant funding that was placed there to help offset these couple of COVID impacts that continue to persist into the 2023 budget.
Right. And so the theory is that...
Mayor, you've gone over your time.
Third time?
Yeah, we'll put you down again. Councillor McCurry.
Chair, thank you. Through you again. With respect to the casino fund, at the outset of our COVID experience, we emptied out the bank account that was once devoted to supporting our museum partners. And we stripped that program out of the casino program. Now that COVID is largely behind us, and I think most people's minds, do we begin once again to automatically fund that program, or does that need to be action that we take to do that?
Through you, Councillor Martin, to Councillor McCreary. We did not automatically start those contributions, so there was separate direction from council that the allocations to the council priorities, the cultural and built heritage, which I think you're referring to, as well as the disaster mitigation reserves, be stopped until there was a review of the policy. By default, the policy does require that the use of casino funds policy be reviewed in the first year of a new term of council. So that will be coming to council this year.
Can we simply restore that by way of resolution?
Through you, Mr. Chair, a resolution isn't needed for us to review. It is part of the policy that we're already directed to review that with council in the first year of a new term.
The first year of a new term concludes 11 months from now, which is a bit down the road. So is it something we can reactivate by way of resolution of this?
Oh, I'm
council?
sorry, Councillor. I thought you were referring to directing a review of the policy.
No, and thank you for reminding me that the name of the program, because we use so much alphabet soup. Yeah, no, I'm simply thinking specifically of reinstating the cultural built heritage support program. So that's something that I could bring by way of resolution to get on that in the first quarter.
Yes, I believe you certainly could do that.
Thanks very much.
Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you. I just want to get some clarification on from what we've been discussing on the tax ratio. I appreciate Pat, your directness on the information. So the 1.1 is what the provincial government has said is the range of fairness across all classes. That'd be correct?
Through the chair. So the range, that's the top of the range is 1.1. There are different ranges for the different classes. So a commercial class, the range of fairness is 0.6 to 1.1. The industrial class is also 0.6 to 1.1, and the multi-residential class is 1 to 1.1. So the 1.1 is the top end of the range.
So the province's range of fairness is wanting the residential taxpayer to pay the lion's share of the taxes. That's what I understand from there, as opposed to less, and the residential taxpayer paying the 1% and everybody else paying less except for multi-residential, which is 1.1. That'd be a fair statement?
If the ratio was set at the lower end of that range of 0.6, then that would be correct.
Okay, so and even in this budget, if we accept the tax ratio, we'll be transferring $31 a year to the $90 increase. I know it's a 30% increase onto the residential taxpayer to take it off of the burden off of the multi-residential, industrial, commercial.
That is correct. The ratio or the policy does transfer $31.48 onto the residential, average residential property.
Thank you, Pat. I appreciate that. And that's besides the position that the business class can actually write their tax expenses off and the residential taxpayer can't. Okay, thank you.
Mary Davis.
It's okay. Don't need that third time.
Okay. So now we need a mover and a seconder for the opening motion of the operating budget. Moved by Councillor Sullivan, second by Councillor Caputo. Okay, so that brings us to boards and agencies. 2A, Brantford Downtown Business Improvement Area. Okay, they're not making a presentation, but there are members here to answer questions. If any members of the Estimates Committee have any questions. No questions? Are there any adjustments anybody wants to make? Okay. BIA gets off easy. Brant County Health Unit, I'd like to now call upon Brent Richardson, CEO, and Lisa DiDonato, Director of Finance from Brant County Health Unit to provide a presentation regarding the 2023 operating budget. Yep. Pick a seat, any one of the spots there. Your mics are on, just whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Good evening, Chair Martin, and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting us here tonight. I'm, as I said, Brent Richardson, CEO of the Brant County Health Unit, and I have with me Lisa DiDonato, our Director of Finance. We're here to present our 2023 budget and answer any questions you may have. Next slide, please. We wanted to share a little background information about us beyond what you may know from our role during the pandemic. The Brant County Health Unit is one of 34 public health units across the province of Ontario. We're an autonomous board of health. The board of health is made up of 3 city councillors, 2 councillors from the county of Brant, and 4 provincial appointees. The work we do is legislatively governed by the Health Promotion and Protection Act, but to a great extent, the program and services are prescribed by the Ontario Public Health Standards. Next slide, please. The work we do in public health happens primarily behind the scenes. We strive to make a difference in our community with preventative health measures. The work we do is designed to protect our communities from infectious diseases such as COVID, environmental threats to their health, and make the food that we consume safer, and to better support and inform our decisions and choices about risk. Public health impacts populations by promoting social conditions that improve health and support the development of healthier built environments such as bike lanes and walkability. The table illustrates all of the programs and services that we're mandated to provide under the Health Promotion and Protection Act and the Ontario Public Health Standards. Some of these programs may be very familiar to you, such as our food premises inspections, well water testing, our vaccine administration, and prenatal classes. However, there are many other programs and services that we offer that are not as well known, such as our infection prevention and control practices that service our long-term care and residential retirement settings, our low-income seniors dental services, healthy babies and healthy children programming. Additionally, about 1/3 of our services are related to school-based programs, including dental and vision screening, school-based immunization, and our comprehensive school health programming. Many of these programs have been scaled back due to the pandemic in the last couple of years. Since 2020, the Board of Health has been directed to take all necessary measures to respond to COVID-19 in our catchment areas, support the Ministry of Health's rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine program, and continue to maintain critical and essential public health programs and services. During the pandemic response, the vast majority of our staff are redeployed to COVID initiatives. However, many of these programs and services were maintained, albeit at a reduced capacity. Next slide, please. Our funding model has experienced a number of changes over the past years. The province and municipalities have shared the cost of delivering public health programs. Under the Health Promotion and Protection Act, the legislation requires contributing municipalities are obligated to pay what the Board of Health deems necessary to meet the cost of delivering mandatory public health programs. The province currently provides a yearly grant of theoretically 70%. This was changed from approximately 75% in 2020. Next slide, please. I will now invite Lisa to walk you through the remainder of our presentation.
So historically, provincial funding requests are submitted in the form of an annual service plan in the first quarter of the funding year, with ministry approval within the last 6 months of the year. In May 2022, the health unit was provided an additional $174,400 in base funding for the 2022-2023 funding year, an impact of $19,950 on the 2023 budget. To date, there's been minimal communication regarding the 2023-2024 cost share funding. At this time, the assumption is that the base funding will be consistent with that provided in the prior year. As illustrated in the table, provincial cost share funding increases have not aligned with municipal funding increases. In 2020, the ministry implemented a mandatory cost sharing change, and BCHU provincial funding grant was reduced by $14,500. In anticipation of the reduction, the health unit recognized a decrease in grant funding with minimal impact on the municipal budgets. The reduction was absorbed by the health unit through the realization of operational efficiencies and service reductions as opposed to being deferred with mitigation funding. Next slide, please. As per the Health Promotion and Protection and Promotion Act, municipal governments are required to pay the expenses of the public health unit. Provincial funding established through policy and an accountability agreement is provided as grants for specific portions of mandatory programs and one-time budgeted expenditures. As the cost sharing between the province and the municipalities is not embedded in the HPPA, municipalities are left to pay the net costs deemed necessary by the Board of Health to deliver public health programs. The Brant County Health Unit 9-member Board of Health is comprised of 3 city appointees, 3 county appointees, and 3 provincial appointees. Unlike other boards and agencies, the health unit is approved by the Board of Health and is forwarded to the municipalities as information only for inclusion in the consolidated budget. Next slide, please. The 2023 budget drivers included 2 collectively bargained agreements with Ontario Nurses Association. Both are in effect until April 2024. The negotiated increase impact on the union and non-union salaries and benefits is approximately $153,000. The 2023 budget also includes $60,000 for the development of a new board-led strategic plan. Additionally, over the last 2 years, employee learning and development was abruptly disrupted by the sudden onset of the global health crisis. The 2023 budget includes an additional $25,000 for employee learning and development. Healthier You is the BCHU internal wellness committee that works to promote and improve individual and organizational wellness. The 2023 budget includes a $12,000 increase in the Healthier You budget to expand wellness and employee engagement initiatives. Next slide, please. The health unit's 2023 expenditure budget is aligned with the Health Promotion and Protection Act and the Ontario Public Health Standards Model for mandated programs and services and provincial funding. As detailed in the table, BCHU has estimated total cost share operating expenses of $12.9 million, resulting in a total municipal increase of $238,059 and $167,396 or 5.79% increase for the city of Brantford. The city's share is subject to the impact of the city-county shared services agreement. As the 2023 city portion decreased to 72%, the increase for the city is 5.79% of the total 5.94% increase. Next slide.
Thank you. Questions, Councilor Carpenter?
Hey, Mr. Chair, through you. Thank you for your report and thank you for highlighting when did the provincial government raise the percentage that the municipalities must pay for the health unit from 70% to 75%? Is that 2020?
Yes, 2020. It was in 2020, yes.
2020. Do you have any idea? Could you give us an idea what that number would be? If we broke this back down to the 70-30%, I guess I could probably do that 5% cut myself, but we would not be having this increase.
It was $14,500 back in 2020, so it would have increased. I'm not sure what the increase is. I didn't do the calculation right now, but.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just wanted the public needs to know when the province is cutting its share of expenditures to help its budget, and then we're forced to increase it on our end to their local municipal taxpayer. To make it work. So I think since the province is finding every way they can to cut funding from municipalities for the benefit of their own budget, I'd like us to keep track of that going forward in all budgets actually, so we can report to the public what the provincial government's actually doing to us and why their taxes are where they are. Thank you.
Councilor McCurry.
Sure, thank you. Welcome, folks. Thanks for the good work you do in our community. Here at the city of Brantford, we're constantly looking at efficiencies and we evaluate the comings and goings of staff and reevaluate our org chart. Do you folks do anything like that?
Through you, Chair. Yes, every vacancy is evaluated to see if it can be repurposed and or filled. So it's an evaluation that happens every time.
And you've held your total labor and fringe benefit increase to 1.5% this year?
Through you, Chair, that is correct.
That's part of a multi-year deal. Yeah. And your other increase, $85,000 is, as you explained, it's largely with employee wellness and things associated to your workforce?
And the strategic plan.
Yeah. When was your strategic plan done last?
Through you, Chair, it was 2016.
When were you first accredited?
The accreditation process, we're no longer accredited. That's not a process that the public health unit goes through anymore.
Oh,
I believe that ended in 2016, 2015, 2016.
didn't know that. I think I was there for the first one way back when. So strat plan then is redone how often?
Through you, Chair, this strat plan took us through to 2022 or 2023, I believe. So
Okay.
it's coming out of COVID. It was a time for us to look at our strategic priorities moving forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is the health unit recommend a safe injection site for the area? Is that something the health unit endorses?
The health unit does support the consumption and treatment site.
Okay, if that was brought in, would you stop the free needle giveaway?
The harm reduction response is part of our, under the Health Promotion Protection Act. It's a requirement.
Okay, well, it's not a harm reduction, it's a harm transfer because it transfers it to the playground where children are encountering the needles. Okay. And in administering your programs, do you do advertising on billboards at all?
Pardon me, sorry, I didn't hear
Do you
that.
do any advertising? Like you rent billboards for getting messages out?
We use various, we've just put in a new sign at the health unit. There's, we're doing advertising in many different modes. I'm not sure if there's any billboards that have been utilized recently.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing nothing for, Councillor Carpenter.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I would be remiss if I let you go without thanking you for the work that the health unit has done over the COVID. That's still ongoing, of course, but I was following your numbers and reproducing them for many years. I just stopped about 6 months ago. It's gotten to be too difficult on the new process. But anyways, I wanted to thank you for the work that you've done under COVID. I think we've been under this health unit, in this community, we've been very successful in the number of immunizations that we were successful in doing in this community. So thank you very much for your work there and all your people. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, seeing no further questions, thank you for your time here tonight.
Thank you.
At this time, we're going to take a break for dinner. We'll be back at 6:15. Okay, we'll get started again. We have Brantford Public Library next. I'd like to call on Raylyn Ambro, CEO, Chief Librarian, and Ken Simons, Corporate Services Administrator for Brantford Public Library. Okay, as soon as you're ready, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Chair Martin, Mayor Davis, and members of the committee for the opportunity to speak about the library's budget submission this evening. As Chair Martin mentioned, I'm Raylyn Arumbro. With me is Ken Simons, our Corporate Services Administrator. And as always, the budget was prepared with direction and approval from the Brantford Public Library Board. And also joining us this evening is Marion McGeehan, Chair of the Library Board. Next slide, please. So the library currently has 2 locations, as most of you probably hopefully know, and we have approximately 60 staff members. So the library continually adapts to changing needs and opportunities, and we manage to do it working within that overall staffing complement. So to Councillor McCreary's point earlier about what the city's practice is, we have the same practice. Over the years, when we've needed to restructure or introduce a new role, it's done through carefully reviewing vacancies and the wider needs of the organization and making adjustments to existing positions within that same FTE limit. So, for example, we used to have a child and youth worker position, and now it has evolved into a social service outreach worker position, which is a very important role for urban public libraries today. So what do our staff do? In 2022, they welcomed over 360,000 visits to our locations in person, and they registered around 5,000 new members. They loaned out around 650,000 items, which if you do the math, works out on average to more than 1 item circulated per every minute of the day. We offer many services, but here I just wanted to quickly highlight the computer, Wi-Fi, and printing use at the library. Internet access is obviously essential in society, and the library plays an important role in bridging the digital divide that exists in the community. Library collections also continue to evolve. And of course, we have traditional collections in multiple formats, both digital and physical. We also have resources that are unique to Brantford in our local history collection that you aren't going to find elsewhere. And we have a growing collection of technology and equipment that people can borrow to discover new skills, knowledge, or experiences, ranging from radon detectors to crafting equipment to parks passes and most recently snowshoes. Next slide, please. So what do we have going on in 2023 that we're excited about? The outgoing library board spent time last year developing a new strategic plan to set priorities for the library in the coming years, and we will be launching that plan shortly. And some of you may recall that we updated the children's area at the main library a couple of years ago. And this year we're planning on updating our youth area, so our teen space. Again, just like with the children's area, this upgrade will be funded by donations made to the library. And specifically, many donations were received last year in honor of former longtime board member Caroline Freibauer, and that updated space will honor her memory and be dedicated to her. As mentioned during the capital budget process, this year we also plan to expand access to library collections in the city by introducing alternative service delivery machines like book kiosks in a couple of locations in the city. Last year, we started the procurement process for acquiring a new integrated library system. In library land, we call that an ILS, and it's the master database for ordering, searching, and circulating materials. Ours had not been updated since the mid-90s previously, but the new system is now on track to launch late next week. We also have a lot of partnerships at the library. They're essential to the work that we do, but I do have one new one in particular I'd just like to quickly highlight. Recently, we were approached by the local Kiwanis Club, who asked us if we would like to jointly develop a literacy event for youth in Brantford, hopefully on an annual basis. And so we're working on plans to develop that. It's going to be unique. And so stay tuned for more information on that as it comes along. Recognizing the library's core value of access for all, the library board invested in inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility project that started last year, which has now established a strategy for prioritizing diversity and inclusion goals at the library on an ongoing basis. Last year, we also conducted a review of the library's IT department, which resulted in some recommendations for improvements to ensure the needs of the organization are met and risks are appropriately mitigated. So a couple of those recommendations have had an impact on our 2023 operating budget, so I'll explain them shortly. And finally, as you know from the capital budget process, planning and design work has begun for a new library branch in a shared facility in the Southwest. Next slide, please. So on to the main event. The library board approved an operating budget request for 2023 in the amount of $160,750. So that's a $195,000 increase over 2022, which works out to a 3.93% increase for the library. So just quickly summarizing where those changes are coming from. Increases to salaries and benefits include some pay equity maintenance requirements that came up last year and some compensation adjustments that were approved for exempt staff. Contingencies for contract negotiations are also included as collective agreements expire this spring. And the IT review that I mentioned previously recommended that an existing vacant IT position at the library be adjusted to become a supervisor level, and the wage difference between the redundant position and the new position are also reflected here. Under IT services, we are seeing some significant unavoidable increases for existing software licenses used at the library. And also the IT review that I mentioned previously recommended an expanded contract with our third-party IT service provider. Since we're also introducing the IT supervisor role that I just mentioned, the library board has approved funding this added expense through a library reserve fund transfer in 2023, because it's our hope that this expanded contract will not be necessary on an ongoing basis once the supervisor role is in place. Under building, security, and administrative budget lines, there was a mix of reductions and increases, but an increase overall. Here we're seeing impacts from inflation and also an unavoidable increase in our security guard expenses. As you likely know, there was an RFP process undertaken in 2022, and the outcome was a new security guard company and higher rates for both the library and the city. And finally, there is an increase in library reserve transfers incorporated into the 2023 operating budget. As I mentioned, the library board approved a transfer from reserves to cover an expanded contract for third-party IT services in 2023. And additionally, under reserve fund transfers, because we're seeing a higher than usual overall increase to the operating budget this year, we don't usually come in at 4%. The library board approved an additional transfer of $50,000 from the library's pandemic stabilization reserve to offset some of the increases during a difficult budget year. So the reserve was created in 2021 from a 2020 COVID-related surplus of the library, with the idea that the surplus could be used in the future to maintain library services when anticipated economic challenges followed the pandemic. And here we are. So in a nutshell, overall, the cost of maintaining library services has increased, and the board has approved mitigating the increase through moderate library reserve transfers, being mindful that one-time transfers won't help in future years for ongoing increases, but may be helpful if used prudently during a particularly challenging budget year. So thank you for your consideration. Next slide. I'm happy to answer questions at this point.
Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Ray Lynn. I'm not looking at any of the slides on your presentation. I'm looking at what we have in our budget material.
Sure.
And I noticed the line children and youth services, $83,000 less in 2023 than 2022. What's usually a negative might delight me. That one doesn't, unless there's a good reason for it.
Sure. Through you, Chair Martin, to Mayor Davis, that one's actually just a matter of moving of positions. Actually, it's related to what I discussed earlier about how we had a child and youth worker position. It used to belong to the Child and Youth Services Department, but when we reworked it into a social service outreach worker role, it then fell under public service. So it was just moving it. You'll see a corresponding kind of increase under public service to not exactly corresponding because there's other increases in public services, but that's basically just moving one position from one department to another.
But the level of service being provided for children and youth, does it remain the same, or is that also being reduced?
The level of service is not being reduced for children and youth.
Glad to hear that.
Councillor McCurry.
Chair, thank you, and through you. So you teased us by talking about renting snowshoes. What's that about?
Through you, Chair. Yeah, we just added, we do have a growing collection of non-traditional library materials. And yeah, we just added snowshoes to the collection with hiking poles. We have a family set, so you can get 4 at a time if you want to go with your kids or grandkids. Yeah.
Very cool. You folks are very innovative, and that's kind of a more recent example of that. When you were here at Capital Time, you'd indicated you're planning the 2 kiosks, if I'm calling them correctly. The labor for that is included in your 2023 operating estimates?
Yes, through the chair, Martin, to Councilor McCurry. We included, we have some people deliveries move around already. We'll be assessing it to determine what the actual impact will be, because we don't really anticipate those to come online until later in the budget year as well.
Right, okay. Now, you indicate you're in labor negotiations right now. So when I ask you how much of your increase is attributable to increased labor and fringe benefits, are you able to answer that question?
Through the chair, negotiations haven't actually started yet. The contracts expire this spring.
What's your total cost of staffing? If you could give us that.
We can, maybe. So not just the increase, but the total.
Yeah, the total for 23.
Through the chair, the 2023 salaries and wages and benefits totals right around 4.1 million. 4.1 million.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. Little more clarification on the reserve transfer increase. So the pandemic stabilization reserve, are you increasing from your operating budget to that reserve? Is that what this is? Or are you taking from that reserve?
Sorry.
Through the chair, Councilor Carpenter, we're taking some funds out of the reserve.
Okay.
So is it based on the current balance in the reserve that was put in place in 2021 as part of 2020 year end? The amount there would allow us to do that for up to 3 years based on what we're pulling out.
Okay. Otherwise, that would be an increase to your operating, and this way it's not.
Correct.
Okay.
Through the chair, it's negating a close to 1% increase.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's a clarification.
Councillor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome. Your cost for security, I think, went up. You indicated. What are the state of affairs? Is it a safe building with what you have there now? In the past, there were concerns, and I'm just wondering, have those concerns been alleviated?
Through the chair, we're pretty proud of our sort of all the layers of I don't know what the right word is, protection. It's a we've trained staff on de-escalation. We have a number of procedures in place to ensure that it is a safe space. Security guards is one component of that, but it's really multiple factors that overall contribute to it. Yeah.
Okay. Have you noticed an appreciable difference once we had the special constables introduced to the downtown area? Are you seeing the effects of that?
Through the chair. Yeah, I think so. It was a lot of things at once. So, I mean, there's winter, things escalate in winter always for us. The constables, I think, joined last fall, summer. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it seems to be a positive thing. And I just wondered how it was affecting you folks.
Yeah, through the chair, the challenge with, as we all know, society continues to move one way. So it's hard to determine any one of the various changes that we make over the years, the impact it's having as those things happen up. So do we have a significant nuisance and problematic behaviors we're dealing with the library? Yes. Some of them been negated by special constables. Hard to say how many, but we see a greater presence walking through the library and all those things that we would deter further behavior. So we can't think that it doesn't have an impact, and I think that all together makes a big difference.
I would add, I think anecdotally quicker response times as well for when we do have to make calls. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So I've just add on that to the integration with the security team, with the city's security team has also made a difference for having extra support when needed as well as that layer. So.
Okay, seeing no further questions. Oh, Councilor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, a question that I wanted to ask separately. The online growth with ebooks, has that been significant for the past year?
Through the chair, yeah, definitely through COVID, especially when in-person borrowing was sort of hampered by various restrictions. We definitely saw ebook use increase. I could probably even pull some stats for you if you let me see. So comparing 2022 to 2019, which would have been our pre-pandemic year, right? 70% increase in online digital circulation. So it's ebooks, but also we recently added, I guess, a couple years ago now, Press Reader, which is a great source for online magazines and newspapers, and that contributes a lot to our overall electronic circulation as well.
And do you take advantage of our wonderful communications department we got to make sure that your programs are widely marketed through our city?
Through the chair, we do have some pretty good partnership with our friends at the city, and we also have a pretty great internal marketing staff as well, and make pretty good use of our social media. But definitely, there's probably could be some more cross promoting going on. Yeah.
And the final question would be, like, the number of ebooks that someone can get is limited to the number of ebooks that you're paying for as a registration, right?
Through the chair, yes, it's if I'm understanding your question correctly, there is a limit to it. It's interesting because you would think if there's an ebook, you could just borrow it on an unlimited basis, but that's not the case. You actually have to wait and place holds and wait your turn for ebooks. Yeah.
I knew that was the case, but I wanted that to be verified for the viewing public. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Brings us to John Nobleholm. I'd like to call on Michelle Bastian, Administrator, Shelley Proax, Director of Finance from the John Nobleholm, to provide their presentation regarding the 2023 operating budget. Go ahead when you're ready.
For you, Mr. Chair, we're very pleased to be able to have this opportunity to present our 2023 budget. Next slide. So the John Noble Home is a long-term care home jointly owned and operated by the city and the county. Services include 156 long-term care beds, with an additional 40 beds being added, starting construction in August of this year, with projected completion by 2025. That will bring us up to 196 beds by January of 2025. We also have our day and stay program, which offers community respite for individuals with dementia in the city and the county. We have 26 seniors apartments as well attached to the home, as well as 56 units on site, which is all operated through the Social Housing Committee. Next slide. Oh, no, sorry. Go back, please. Sorry, next slide. So our 2023 initiatives for the John Noble Home is to really work hard to meet all the strict timelines that we have to maximize funding for the home. We do receive different types of funding, including IPAC funding and our new development funding as well. We really are working hard to submit every opportunity to get enhanced funding for the project, so we don't miss out. And recently, we just were able to get a lot more funding from the province with our new bed development. We do continue to be the facility choice in the community. We are a best practice home, and we do have a great reputation in the community. We also have a growing wait list, which continues to grow as we are the best choice for all of the city and in the county. We utilize funding in all areas with the goal to meet that 4 hours of direct care per resident per day. And we're already meeting that goal as the province does fund in stages. So right now we're looking forward to meeting that 4 hours of direct care by 2025. Next slide, please. So the budget overview gives us a snapshot of the amount of funding that we do need from the city. The city share of our operating budget is 1.8 million, or actually more specifically, last year's budget was 1,827,000, and this year's budget is 1,886,000, which equates to an increase of 59,000. When you factor in all the budget drivers, the 3.24% increase is actually really, really healthy. We are confident that we're able to meet this budget. And some of the budget drivers that I can mention right now is the impact of COVID-19 and the provincial funding that we do get. It's not that we are given this funding, for the next 3 years right away. We have to wait until that letter comes in from the ministry confirming that we do have that funding. So we have a lot of strategic ways of utilizing funding, making sure that we spend every dime of it before the end of the year. And the fiscal year for the ministry is March 31st. So having said that, we do work really hard to utilize all the funding that we get from the ministry, so none of it gets sent back. Because if you don't use it by March 31st every year, you lose it. Right now, there's a lot of extra costs related to raw food, the rising cost of staff compensation and benefits. There's a lot more usage of the long-term disability and short-term disability benefit plans. We're seeing, it also gets used up when we have staff that do get COVID in the home, or they might have COVID from the community. There is that usage of the benefits programs, more specifically the short-term disability benefits. And that has really made our premiums for these benefits increase. The raw food prices are not meeting up with inflation. Right now, we're seeing increase of up to more than 10%. And I don't know if there's going to be any improvements to that. but we certainly have a lot of strategies in place to really meet our food costs, and we're always looking for ways that we can utilize funding there as well. The increase of staffing shortages and overtime in the home has really triggered extra costs as well, and we know that there's going to be more for this year. However, we are enhancing our staffing levels. We've done a lot of extra staff job fairs to make sure that we have the proper amount of personal support workers and registered staff to be able to meet compliance in the ministry and be able to really improve retention as well. The supply chain and raising fuel costs has really made a negative impact for everyone for this sector. It does cost money to get all our goods and services and our food delivered to the home. And when you got trucks driving across Canada, deliver whatever you need, there's a lot of extra delivery costs added to that. Our union contracts are up for negotiation. So these are all factors that are budget drivers. And I think the 3.2% increase is actually really generous. And I think we have the opportunity to meet that target. Next slide, please. And that's it. I'm open for questions.
Councilor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. And thank you, Michael. Thank you, Shelley. The 4 hours of direct care that we're going to meet by 2025, where are we at now with that number?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to hand this over to Shelley.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Currently, the home must meet 3 hours and 3.25 hours. With the most recent staffing survey that was completed, we were well above and inching towards the 4 hours of care. However, we were including other positions that we're just not 100% sure that the ministry is including in that number. Through you, Mr. Chair, those positions being activation, your nurse practitioner positions like that. But through you, Mr. Chair, we're certainly well on our way to that number.
So we were kind of ahead of the number to start off with.
Through you, Mr. Chair, certainly we were above others in the industry. Through you, Mr. Chair, what we can say though is all new provincial funding that's coming that way, through you, Mr. Chair, must be spent on extra hours of staffing.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, then in the funding, and to give the province credit where credit's due here, the province is actually, when they increase the hours of care, they automatically, on a monthly basis, submitted the extra funding to us to be able to provide that care rather than waiting quarterly or annually.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct, that we are receiving enhanced funding in both the nursing and personal care envelopes through you, Mr. Chair, as well as what's called allied services for activation, social work, restorative care. And we do receive those monies monthly.
And of course, that's all homes in the province. Can you just sort of enlighten council and the estimates committee about the funding, extra funding that, and this is another good story from the province, but extra funding that they gave us towards our build because the interest rates have gone up and the cost of building's gone up?
So through you, Mr. Chair, through much advocacy by the association and by our councils, the not-for-profit sector, municipal sector are for shovel-ready projects such as ours. Through you, Mr. Chair, will receive more than double the amount of per diem funding through you, Mr. Chair, to apply to our construction project. This is an extra grant through you, Mr. Chair. There are, as Michael said, some strict timelines to meet to get it. However, through you, Mr. Chair, our project is certainly well positioned to do so, and we will be able to take advantage of all that funding.
And the province, or both councils, this council and the county council, approved the increased cost for that build. Will that number actually come down then with this extra funding?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it is an approved project. And through you, Mr. Chair, we will certainly be bringing back a revised construction budget and how, through you, Mr. Chair, this funding will help to offset any costs on this project.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to highlight that, what council's previously passed is going to actually, those numbers are coming down and thankful for the province for doing this. But I want to add one more thing. As a province still having us frozen at a 1% increase for their funding?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we are targeting a 2% increase. Through you, Mr. Chair, that is what we saw last year on our envelopes. Through you, Mr. Chair, we did get extra in the raw food. But through you, Mr. Chair, even the 2% is not keeping pace with inflation. And the additional funding that's coming to the home is directed to specific programs like increasing the direct hours of care. So through you, Mr. Chair, we're not seeing provincial increases to match the inflationary pressures that the home is facing.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, I want to make the full presentation. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Councillor McCurry.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, folks, and thanks for the info and the great presentation. Having sat on the committee for a number of years, Councilor Carpenter and I were on last term together, and I just want to say, for the benefit of folks watching and for members here who've never had that much exposure to John Noble Home, that we are very proud of the facility and very proud of the folks that work there. And you deliver some pretty compassionate, caring support for people in our community. And we truly are a facility of choice, which wasn't the case going way, way, way back. And I'm pretty sure that we're the #1 choice for a lot of people that come through our doors. So thanks again.
Seeing nothing further, does anybody want to make any changes to their budget? Seeing none, thank you very much. Which brings us to the Brantford Police Services. And I would now like to call upon Ron Davis, Chief of Police. I don't see Jason Sanders here. He might be here virtually. And Kareem Ali, Chief Financial Officer, to provide presentation regarding the 2023 operating budget. Welcome, gentlemen, and begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of council, the deputy chief.
Can you hear me there? There we are.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of council. The deputy chief is joining us. He's virtual, but may be having some technical issues. I talked to him when I left the office. So if we do need an answer for him, I ask for your indulgence so that I can text him and let him know that we're okay. Perfect.
Through you, Chair, my issues are resolved, Chief. I'm here.
Awesome. So thank you for having us tonight. I'd like to, first of all, before we get into our presentation, somebody mentioned it earlier about how we're moving towards multi-year budgeting, and I just want to acknowledge and thank the work of our CIO, Brian Hutchings, the work of city finance staff, and our own chief financial officer, so we can push towards this. It's been something that I've been passionate about for the entire time I've been here. It allows us to plan for the police service properly, and it helps us avoid those spikes that can be then more predicted for the council, the board, and for the citizens of Brantford. And so I just want to acknowledge everybody that's moved us in that direction for multi-year budgeting. And as a result, this will be our last single year budget for the 2023 year. Next slide, please. I'd also like to thank the people that helped put the presentation together and pulled all the data. Again, our Chief Financial Officer, Cameron Ali, Deputy Chief Jason Saunders. I'd like to thank our Corporate Communications Manager, Robin Matthews Osman, as well as all of the city staff that worked with Cameron in helping us gather our numbers and information. Next slide, please. So we're here to discuss our operating budget. This covers our day-to-day expenses required to deliver the essential services to the community. And again, after this year, we'll be moving to a multi-year budget. The funding sources are tax supported, grant funding, and fees for service. Next slide, please. I think you were all here for the capital budget, but I'll just reiterate this. If you're doing your due diligence with respect to the role of council and the board when it comes to the estimates, if you Google Police Act, as we speak today, we are still operating under the 1990 Police Act. It's very likely when you Google it, you will get the 1990 Ontario Police Services Act, but you'll also get the Ontario Police Comprehensive Ontario Police Services Act 2019 Bill 68. That is not yet in force. So as we speak right now today, we are still acting under the provisions of the 1990 Ontario Police Services Act, which in section 39.3 lays out the responsibility of council that upon reviewing the estimates, the council shall establish an overall budget for the board for the purposes described in clause 1A and B. And in doing so, the council is not bound to adopt the estimates submitted by the board. Subsection 4 states, in establishing an overall budget for the board, the council does not have the authority to approve or disapprove specific items in the estimates. And so to the mayor's question earlier, to one of the earlier presenters, you had asked what happens in the police realm. If the council does not approve it, it is then sent back to the police services board to then have deliberations and further discussion. And then the onus falls to the police services board to have that conversation while ensuring that we're meeting adequacy standards to deliver adequate and effective policing. So that's what we operate under as today is the 1990. So if you are doing your due diligence and Googling or searching the two police acts, please look at that one. That's the one in force today. We're hoping the new police act will come into effect this year, but as we speak right now, that's the one we're going to operate under. And so at this point, I'll turn it over to our Chief Financial Officer, Cameron Ali.
Thank you, Chief. So over the next few slides, I'm going to talk about a lot of statistical data. The source for the data is from Stats Canada or directly from the police service websites. Next slide, please. Just very few highlights. Patrol area cost per kilometer square for Brantford is 574,000 when compared to Barrie and Guelph. We're lowest between those. The population estimates again from Stats Canada 2021 report. As you can see, the call for service has gone up, so you could see the decrease in call of service during COVID, and then it started picking up. Last year, the call for service was 53,229, which percentage to the population, about 50.85% of the population calling in for the police service for different health issues. Next slide, please. Again, this information is from directly from Stats Canada. It talks about crime severity index. The rule of thumb is higher the number, the worse you are. So for Brantford, it's 75.7. Canadian average is 73.7. So we're a little bit higher than the average across the country. Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide. Thank you. With all those challenges, there's some challenges obviously for the police services. The 4 key areas are staffing, population growth, community safety, external pressure. 2 of the ones I want to highlight is the community safety, which includes traffic safety, drug and gang-related crime, homicide, firearm and violent armed trends, complex and resource investigation. Other thing I want to highlight is obviously the other side of the coin, which would be the staffing. The frontline support, mental health, and short-term and long-term disability for the staff that we have, especially with the police officers in the service. Next slide. This slide talks about a comparison with some of the other police services. Again, 2021 numbers, that's what's available through Stats Canada. Talks about the population, the budget, number of officers, pop to cop ratio, per person, dollar value, households, number of household, and per dollar value for the household for that. Across the country, household cost is $1,013. For Brantford, for 2021 numbers, $901. Next slide, please. Moving on from 2021 to 2022, this kind of compares on a very high level, just to give more information to the committee about the budget and number of staffing that's out there for the police officers and civilian staff with Brantford compared to some of the other police services across the country. Next slide, please. This slide talks about a 5-year comparison from 2018 to 2022 for the budget for the police service. Details of all these numbers are in Appendix A with the link associated with, if you click on the link, you'll be able to see those numbers. On an average, 5-year average, you can see Brantford is sitting at $36.38 million in terms of the budget, which is, as you can compare it to Thunder Bay, which is at 45.8, as well as Barrie, which is $53.8 million. So just an average over the 5 years. Next slide, please. So comparing the operating budget for 2022 versus 2023, the first number has been updated for Barrie is that their ask for 2023 is 63.24, which is about 7.28% of increase. Thunder Bay is at 12.7% increase. Brantford for the police service, we're looking at 7.96%, compared, $44.6 million compared to 41.34 in 2022. Next slide. For 2023 budget ask, this kind of gives you the comparison, a variance of a change for 2022 versus 23, as well as, kind of changing the dollar value and the percentage. The dollar value change is about $3.295 million, with the increase of $7.96 million. I'll be going into each one of these areas just to give you a highlight on what the actual change are. But the bigger piece is in the wages and salaries, which includes a one-time adjustment for the salaries, which I'm going to talk about in a bit in the next slides. Next, please. Okay, so what are you getting for 3.295 million or 7.96 billion? It's a revenue reduction, which is a lost revenue, mostly to the third party checks. So that's one of the bigger portion for that. For salary and wages, the $1.6 million. So all the departments within the city, except for the police and fire, the budget, how the salaries are budgeted are at the actuals and not at the top level of the bands, if you would. So we're just making that adjustment, one-time corrections for that. The board had decided to do this correction over the 5 years. So you'll see that 800,000 increase in the salary lines for the next 4 years. So 2023 to 2027. So that's one adjustment. Other piece of that of 800,000 is the contractual increases for the police service. So that's that. Budget pressure, that's the inflation for the operating expenses, which is in line with Bank of Canada interest rate, which is how the city is also proposing the 6.9%. So that's exactly what that is. It is on the contracted services and supplies, if you would, for the police service. Operating impact for the capital. So since the capital budget was approved by council, this is the operating impact for that. So if you remember, there was a capital project for body worn and tasers and digital evidence management. This is the operating impact for that capital project. We did adjust it for the gapping, which is in the salary. So the net salary is actually $1 million instead of 1.6. So you can see the 0.600 or 600,000 adjustment in there. There's an unmet needs for about 900,000, which includes 7 full-time staffing and other operating expense. I'll be talking a little bit further about the unmet need and the life cycle account. So again, some of these are changes we have made or adjustment that's required and one-time changes, especially to the life cycle account. That would mean setting up life cycle accounts for various assets that the police service had, which will allow then for a lower number of capital asks for the next year going forward. So if this is approved and we got this funding, it will allow for reduced capital asks going forward for 24 and onwards. Next slide, please. This slide talks about the 5 years overtime. It's a lot of lines on a monthly basis, but what it's talk about is our average over budget is about $1 million for overtime. And for last 5 years, it has not been increased. So average cost of an overtime is about $118,000 per month. So which comes to about $1.4 million. So we're already short on the overtime side of things as a budget line item. Next slide, please. This slide just talks about the investigations. And then this is not the full picture because of how we we're capturing the data in terms of the costing of things. So that has been fixed now going forward. 2023, we create a new business unit that would capture more and accurate data information on the homicide cost. But as you can see, this, there's over the 3 years that kind of gives you overtime dollar value for that. Next slide, please. So we're going to just quickly talk about the unmet need of the 900,000, as you've seen in the previous slide. That includes 6 civilian staff, 1 sworn member, which is a constable for the training unit, and includes 115,000 for the other operating expenses, which includes software for IT, human resource management. That's also software, and additional funding for the training for 50,000. This also, the 900,000 also includes a one-time cost of 97,000, which would be the initial cost for hiring them staff, computers, furniture, all that kind of stuff as a startup cost. Next slide, please. This slide talks about the life cycle. There's a lot of lines in there. What it does talk to you about is that over the next 10 years, putting the fundings away for different projects or different equipment. For example, K9, for dog purchase, for potentially robot, UAVs, like building stores, training units, all that kind of stuff. And then it's projected out for next 10 years. It is inflation. It's been adjusted for the inflation as well. What it will allow is to reduce asks again for the capital side of things when we come for next year. Next slide, please. Just a quote from Albert Einstein says, "Significant problems we face cannot be solved with the same level of thinking we were at when we created them." So something we had to think outside the box. Hence, you see all these different changes in terms of life cycle, looking at multi-year budgeting and all that kind of stuff. Just to bring us to the next level. Next slide, please. So why should it be considered to approve? Again, 4 big areas. Service to the community. Biggest piece of that is to maintain and enhance service level. Next portion, obviously, is the officer safety, which is linked to the safe, service to the community, because if the officers are safe physically and mental well-being is, taken care of, then they can serve the, obviously the community. The bottom 2 pieces are more for financial side of things, for asset replacement, which is the life cycle, which definitely reduce the future ask. All the equipment and vehicle replacement goes through that process. Again, reducing the capital ask for that. Financially responsible, all these would be transparent and accountable. All the information would be, available, obviously, to the board, police service board for that, for the review and stuff. Next questions. So I'll just open it up for questions at this time. Thank you.
Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. What would be the actual role of the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Specialist?
Thank you for the question. So the role of the EDI, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Specialist, is that they're part of the Office of the Chief, and that they're putting a diverse lens on all of our policies, all of our practices. They're part of our decision-making process, so that we bring a different point of view with the prerequisite skills, knowledge, experience that, to be quite candid, aside from myself and Cameron, we don't have sitting around that senior leadership team. And as the city of Brantford changes its demographics and becomes more inclusive and open to people coming here from diverse cultures and from 6 nations, many who are residing here already, it's imperative on this police service that we start having that added lens into reviewing policies, decisions, procedures, all of those things. Just to give an example that will, I pray we never get there. But if you watch a lot of the coverage on the events in Memphis, the question is, how did these officers from diverse backgrounds wind up becoming just another police officer that engaged in that activity? And so that's where the EDI specialist will help put an extra set of eyes, an extra set of skills to help us in our decision making, so that we're reflective of other points of view in the community.
Thank you.
Councillor McCurry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, guys. Prior to the expiry of my term on the Police Services Board, there was some discussion about hiring over strength capacity to reduce overtime? Has that been taken into account?
Through the chair, yes, as you would see the asks in the budget ask, there's no overtime ask in here, so that was considered.
What you're saying is there's no increase in the overtime budget.
Correct.
So the overtime budget lives on at its 2022 rate?
That is correct.
Have you also budgeted for overstrength officers?
That is part of the, no, so because that adjustment will come through the salary line, which will be part of the disability and, cost reduction there.
Sorry, was that a yes or a no?
I'll answer. That's a yes. It's been accounted for.
So the overtime remains the same as 22, correct?
Correct.
But you also have overstrength officers in the budget. So you've increased your complement as well.
So our official complement, no, has not increased. The resolution was very specific to be worded that it is overstrength officers that would be backfilling people that were out of the workplace for 6 months plus a day or more. It gave the discretion to the chief to backfill those by doing the one-time adjustment to our salaries being at the top end, like all of the other business units in the city, with the exception of fire. That now gives us the latitude to hire these overstrength officers. But I must be very clear that that's not an increase in our complement. These officers are specifically designated as overstrength.
So let me reposition my question then. So you're maintaining your overtime budget at the 2022 rate.
Correct.
You will have more officers working for you as well, and you've budgeted for those additional officers.
Yep. Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Also, I recollect that there was an exercise that was carried out a number of years ago, and I'm not good with alphabet soup, but I think it might have been called Metascan. Am I correct there? Is that the name of the consultant report?
Through the chair, it's METScan.
See, not Metascan, as in I met a scan on my way to the budget meeting. So how are we coming with that?
It's ongoing. Many of the recommendations have been put in place. The restructuring of our criminal investigations section. I gave a briefing to the board at the last month's meeting. Now allows for proper mentorship. That was one of the big ones. The financial efficiencies. The board. A big one was to bring in a civilian equivalent at the inspector rank, and he's sitting beside me, and he's worth his weight in gold or platinum, whichever is worth more. Because he's been an incredible asset to the police service and helped us find additional efficiencies. So it's ongoing and going very well.
What was the date of the final report?
I don't recall it having a final report. It's to me, it's a living document. It's ongoing. There were a number of recommendations in there that were, there were some that were finite. There were many that were ongoing.
What was the date that information was provided by the consultant to the police service?
I would have to check. It was, I'm guessing,
2020,
late 2019, early 2020.
Okay.
Deputy, do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, through the chair, May 31st, 2019.
Did we get a copy of your budget?
Yeah, you should have it. It was
other than the presentation document.
Yeah, it was provided through the city. Yes.
Did you get? You see? Okay, thank you. Council Carpenter says we do have one. I haven't seen it. And can you explain how the budget for 2023 helps to address the list of community priorities that was provided to the service during 2022, outlining things like traffic concerns and noisy mufflers?
Through the chair, because of the one-time correction to fund us at the top end, thereby allowing us to hire overstrength officers, over authorized strength officers, then that allows us to run at our full capacity, or as close to as quick as we can hire, whether that be experienced officers or new recruits. So because we're not We, like most other police services in Ontario, are typically running between 20 and 25% vacancy due to people out of the workplace, which is an Ontario norm. By us having the one-time correction and the ability to hire over strength, we then have the officers to focus on those sections like traffic that would focus on noisy mufflers, aggressive driving.
What's the total, one more question, Mr. What's the total amount that you've budgeted for the overstrength officers, wages and benefits?
Through the chair, I'll have to look into that and provide it to you.
When?
Wednesday.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got questions in regards to the unmet needs, the equity, diversion, inclusion specialist. What metrics will you have in place to measure the performance and the extent to which this person will be making a contribution measurable to addressing this issue?
I can prepare a report for you that I will channel through the board. If I'm not prepared to answer that at this time, my vision is that we're going to replicate the big services that have an EDI specialist that have had them in play for a number of years. So I can channel a report through the board to the council.
In respect to the corporate communication coordinator, is that in respect to communications with the outside world, or is that internal communication?
Through the chair, it'll be a blend, but primarily more of the instantaneous stuff to the outside world as well as to the inside. So we currently have a communications manager who takes 100 pages and condenses them into several pages. And it's consuming. So this will be somebody that's doing more of the instantaneous communication that we need to get it externally and internally.
Okay. So currently you have one person in that position. So over the course of 1 year, you're going to be doubling that. Is there really a need to double it?
Absolutely. Through the chair, absolutely. Our communications managers, to be quite blunt, overworked. She answers her phone 24/7 every time we have a major event. My expectation of my criminal investigators is that they're relaying the information to her so that we can get stuff out into the public and to the media, because our experience has been if we don't feed the media, they create their own story, which is quite often not reflective of the realities of what we're dealing with, and then leads us down rabbit holes and chasing rumors. So there's definitely a need to get that communication out.
And the Freedom of Information and the FOIP coordinator, do you currently have a person who fills that position?
Through the chair, no, we don't. This was brought forward to the board. There was a pilot done to see if we could get away with a part-time. The recommendation at the end of that pilot was there's enough work for a full-time, and then through COVID, what we found for whatever reason, FOI requests really increased, not so much the number, but the level of detail in each request. So there's more than enough work for a full-time FOI coordinator, and that was identified last year as well.
And will there be metrics for this position, for example, in terms of measuring the number of days it takes to respond to an FOI request? Do you have those metrics right now?
Through the chair, we do have metrics. I don't have them with me. I'd have to reach out to our records manager to see what she used when we did the pilot. That was presented to the board, like I said, last year, that we needed a full-time one, so I can get those metrics if you wish.
And the senior program IT person, do you have an IT person at present?
We do have an IT manager, but not a programmer. So this person would be part of the what they will be doing is looking at IT programming in terms of, creating dashboards, Power BIs, like linking all those telematics from the police service and kind of bringing it together. So that'd be one part of their role.
So what is the IT manager doing right now?
IT manager, he's not a programmer. So programmers, there is very specific, skill set.
So what is the IT manager doing right now?
So through the chair, I'll jump in here. He manages, we have several IT staff. He coordinates their efforts, their work that they're doing. He coordinates the integration of different systems that we're bringing into the police service as new technologies come on board. He's our primary liaison to the Pride Cooperative that we belong to for our records management system and our CAD. And so he's managing it. If I want to draw a comparison to your world, it would be, he's the mayor and the programmer will be the CIO in the IT space, if you will. The programmer gets stuff done to make systems communicate with each other.
I might get rid of the mayor and just leave the CAO in there. So the policy analyst training administrative support, so is this an administrator or?
Through the chair, so we're constantly, as the police service and police services in general, there's always inquests, there's always recommendations, there's court cases where there's recommendations for police service to update our policies. We're very good at updating policies, comparing them to the CALEA body that we belong to. Where the gap is making sure those policies are then embedded into how we train our officers. And like our trainers, they're doing the hands-on training, but we need that conduit to take paper policy and ensuring that it's reflected in the lesson plans. And it's a hybrid position. So part of it will be that transitional piece to make sure it's embedded into the lesson plans. The other part, excuse me, is to record the training that our officers are doing to ensure that we have all current up-to-date records, so that should we ever have an event where, say, SIU is here for an officer-involved shooting, those records are current, up-to-date, can be located easily in one location. And so it's a hybrid of policy and training support vis-a-vis the records side of it.
You've exceeded your time, Mr. Mayor. I can put you back on the list.
I may ask to go back on the list. I'll hold off for now.
As board chair, I'd like to address the concern that Councilor McCurry had. The overtime budget was exceeded considerably. The option was to either increase the amount of the overtime budget or bring in the overstrength officers. So because we're bringing in the overstrength officers, we're not reducing the overtime budget because it's been so far exceeded. We're hoping that it'll come back down to the amount that's budgeted. So I don't know if that helps address your concerns there, Councilor McCurry. You mentioned that the IT manager is not a programmer. How many programmers do we have?
At this point, none.
Not much of an IT department without a programmer.
Yes. So right now we rely on the Pride or, the other, the Pride group to kind of get some of those services. So we'd like to do that in-house, right? So that's why reason it's there.
Okay. Do you need to be looking at reducing somebody else from your IT department who's not a programmer?
Through the chair, no. We are automating so many functions in the police service, and I need to preface this with it. In no way am I throwing stones at any of my predecessors or previous boards. It shocked me when I came into the organization, and I'm not speaking for Cameron, but we've talked, and it shocked him how many paper-based systems we're utilizing. And because of that, it's next to impossible to capture a lot of data that would help us in doing real data-driven business decisions. So we have automated a lot of processes. The board's aware of Geotab as an example that we've introduced to help us. We've introduced other software for our fleet. We're automating so many systems. Those are just two small examples. But every time we introduce these systems, when we want them to talk to each other, we need for the programmer. But the more systems we have, the more chance there is for failure. And so a lot of our people will be tied up in sort of I'll call it a help desk function. That's not doing service to the work they do, but they're constantly dealing with the officers coming in that are having issues with their laptops, with their phones. They can't get onto this program. They can't get onto that program. So they're hopping all the time dealing with those. Again, it's not doing a service to what they do, but that help desk side of the house, the programmer is that missing link between the manager and the people we currently have.
Okay. Any further questions? Councilor McCurry.
Chair, thank you. Through you. What's before us, the budget that was produced with input from the senior management team at Elgin Street?
Yes, it went through the whole process, working with the senior management team, and was approved by the board as well.
Any input from sworn civilians or association? Any suggestions for deficiencies from rank and file folks?
So we went through the management, so not necessarily the senior management, but the other manager levels. Yes, and we got their inputs as well.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, Chief and Deputy, let me say how proud I am of the organization and the work that you've been doing. When I look at the 5-year comparison that we use Barrie, Guelph, Peterborough, Sault Ste. Marie, Sudbury, and Thunder Bay. But out of those, only Guelph is the only one that's in the Greater Toronto Hamilton region where the major crime seems to be existing. Would it be a fair statement to say that as Brantford has grown and a lot of new people have come from outside the community, that not only has everybody else discovered how great Brantford is, so has the criminal element and crime has risen here?
Through the chair, absolutely. I'll take it a step further. When I present to groups and I talk about how the changing crime trends have occurred here, I reflect back to when the mayor would get on CH and encourage people to bring their business, bring their warehouse, bring their, you name it, their factory to Brantford. We're on the 403. We have the CN line. We have the Via train. We have the GO bus. We're centrally located. We're more affordable. Raise your family here. All of those exact same tenets apply to organized crime and criminal organizations. And I think it'll take it a step further is that those organizations are very aware of where they can have a lucrative industry. And it's you take a police service like Toronto, their guns and gang units twice the size of maybe not twice the size, but it's bigger than our entire police service. So it's very lucrative for criminals to come to Brantford. And then add on top of that we're perceived by those organized groups. And again, this doesn't have to be Tony Soprano level, this can be very organized street gangs that if they come to Brantford because of where we are, that it's lucrative to come here. And so all those same tenets apply to come here. It's cheaper, it's more affordable. You have those transportation routes, but on top of it, you have a police service that was really operating in a bit of a bubble, a silo, if you will. And so we're very proud of the work we've done over the last 3 years to become a player with all the other police services, that collaboration, so we can effectively address the crime. I think our work speaks for itself. We've been part of some of the major busts in Ontario history in the last 2 years. And so to answer your question is absolutely, the crime is changing. The complexity of the crime is changing. Another layer, when I talk to the Crown attorneys, the level of defense lawyers changing. You're getting the professional, sorry, let me rephrase it. You're getting the lawyers that make a professional of defending criminals from guns or from gangs and those types of groups coming to this city. So absolutely, it has completely changed. We can't draw any comparisons to 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. The crime has changed in this city.
I know that's true. The community has been reflecting that in calls that I get. And I've also seen an increase of, like you said, the arrests and the bust for the drugs and so forth. As we're working in partnership with other police forces, and that's why we're able to succeed in getting these working together on the same criminal element that's happening out to Hamilton, Brantford.
Yeah, through the chair, absolutely. We're very proud of the partnerships we've forged. To be candid, we're punching above our weight class. I'm confident that's one of the reasons that the province supported us in funding our newly established heat unit that will further address guns and gangs. So absolutely, we're in partnership. We're just entering into a new partnership with the RCMP. But every day, we're into investigations where we're collaborating with surrounding areas here throughout the GTA and throughout the province and across Canada.
And finally, the changes that you put in place since you've been as our police chief, they're not always employees aren't always satisfied with changes when you make changes that are produce more productivity in our community. So have you been able to get through those processes?
Yes, sir. I've been policing for 32 years, and I can tell you, cops hate two things: the way things are, and then the minute you change them. But the reality is the police service needed to change again because of the changing dynamics in the city where we are geographically. And it's uncomfortable. Change is naturally uncomfortable for humans. And in policing, a profession that turns, like the Titanic, to bring in aggressive change, and it had to be aggressive, to be quite candid, because we were being overrun. The double homicide in 2019, I think, was a wake-up call for this city. And then if you look at the crimes we've had since then, but also our ability to respond to those is a clear demonstration that we needed to change. And so it couldn't be a long, protracted, drawn out affair. Let's change a little bit here, a little bit there, because the city would lose, the citizens would lose, public safety would lose. So to answer your question, I think we're starting to turn the corner. That we have a number of young members, we've created opportunities, and as again, the work speaks for itself. And I think the membership is taking great pride in the work from the hard work they perform every day.
And just one final question, Mr. Chair, before, so I don't have to come back again. The Police Services Board, how many of the Police Services Board members other than the council members are here today? Just the two council members?
Just the two council representatives.
All right, thank you.
And further to the chief's answer to Councillor Carpenter, Brantford is centrally located, but one of the things the chamber talks about is networking, businesses getting together and discussing things. And with the closing of the Brantford jail, it's created a networking opportunity for criminals in Milton. And that's resulting in a lot of Toronto crime coming to Brantford because the criminals have that networking opportunity to get together and discuss their operations and how they can enhance each other. So that creates additional problems for us as well. Councillor Caputo.
Thank you, Chair, through you to staff. Actually very refreshing to hear that the actual police department is operating as a business these days in terms of the model that it's taken and how it's proceeding forward. Couldn't agree more with the fact that as we grow, so does everything go with it. Not only do we grow in population, we'll grow in businesses, we'll grow in retail, we'll grow in crime. So I applaud what you guys are doing there and keep up the good work. Just one question about overtime. Just noticed that $1 million. Was there a breakdown of where that $1 million came from? Like what was the biggest contributor to it? And how are you addressing that part of, because if that means more staff, generally that comes with benefits, that comes with hours, that comes with everything else. Source deduction come into play. Is it actual savings to use overtime, or is it something that you need to be able to move going forward?
Okay, through the chair. So the most of the overtime is coming from obviously the officers, which accounts for about 83% of that. And 13% of that is through the administration, if you would, or the civilian side of things. The way we're looking to address that is in terms of, how Chief mentioned, in terms of overhiring over and above the line. To that piece of it, for the last 5 years, the overtime budget was $1 million. We've always been over that $1 million, in some cases $400,000, $500,000 over and above. How we accounted for that in previous years were from the saving from the staff when they're either on disability or away, or we could cut some cost recovery, if we got some recovery from secondments and all that kind of stuff. So that would have paid for it. Because we have not come forward, or our budget line for the overtime had not increased in the previous years. And that's why even for 2023, we had decided to keep it low. The board had approved the overhire or over and above that limit. So that would help us with that piece of it.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Does anybody want to make any changes? Councillor Samuel.
I'd like to move a motion that the funds previously approved from the Council Priorities Reserve for an adult crossing guard at the intersection of Tecumseh Street and Marie Ave from the 2022-2023 school be used instead for the 2023-2024 school year, subject to the approval by the Brantford Police Services Board to add a crossing guard at this location. Seeking a seconder for that.
You want to speak to that further?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to the need in the community and that's something that was an identified need. And doing this would take the pressure off the police services budget to provide that crossing guard because the funds have already been set aside for council. So this would just give another opportunity for the Princess Elizabeth School to have that adult crossing guard and that safety there. And I'm hoping that members of council would help support this tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you. I do support this, and I think council supported it in funding. We just never got there. I'm just wondering if we could use it from the funding source that we've said so for this time, so it doesn't increase the police services budget, but that'd be rolled into their budget for next year so that we're not looking for those funds for next year, if that makes any sense. Thank you.
Joel?
Sure, I can provide some context here. So I think this is what this motion is suggesting, is that the city did provide funds during 2022 to provide for this for one school year. It's my understanding that the board didn't approve to add a guard there, so those funds haven't been spent, but they are still available. And what this would, I guess, reinstate is that the city would provide those funds for the next school year should the police services board approve to put a guard there. So the bottom line is there would be no impact on either budget for the 2023 year.
What about for the following year? Would that be something that the city would continue to pay for, or would that be an increase in the police budget?
This motion just suggests that the city would fund that for the 2023 to 2024 school year.
For the 1 year.
And beyond that, there's no funding commitment on the part of the city.
Okay. And Chief, I believe this was one that the warrant study didn't warrant.
Yeah, that's correct. Through the chair, yeah. The city had done their traffic study and it did not warrant it. It was more public requests that were driving it.
Yeah, and I think in the warrant study, it said that as many people were crossing mid-block as were going down to the corner where the crossing guard would be. So it's okay. Thank you. Any other questions, comments on this? Councillor Sluss.
Could someone remind me the dollar value, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So what was approved in July was actually to provide guards at 3 locations for a total of 24,000. This recommendation tonight addresses just one of those locations, so I expect the cost would be about $8,000.
Councillor McCurry.
Yeah, I'm supportive of this. Could we get a reminder of what the other 2 locations were?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can get that information for you.
The other locations were Verardi and Francis White Oaks and
Briar Crescent.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chair. And I seem to recall that at the Police Services Board, the vote was 3-2 with the everybody but the chair and I at the time voting against it. And perhaps if it were to come back to the board again, it might pass there, but this obviates the need for that. So I think with the leave of the mover and seconder, it would be appropriate to include all those locations in this resolution, as Councillor Martin, as chair, has indicated. And I would move, if the group considers it friendly, that's fine. If not, I would move to amend Councillor Samwell's resolution to include those locations at the amount of money that the finance department would provide us with.
Is that friendly to the mover and seconder? No other objections? Okay. Any further comments, questions? Councillor Carpenter.
Yeah, I just want to comment the question about warrants and studies. I mean, as councillors, we often find that the warrants don't meet the particular needs. And the warrants can be, they don't show the near misses or the incidences of safety that the parents and the neighborhood sees, that the ward councillors see on a regular basis. So warrants aren't all, what they're meant to be. They're just warrants about studies at the time, that snapshot picture. But the ward councillors, in my opinion, and I've been here a while, seem to know better than most warrant studies. Thank you.
Seeing no further comments or questions, we'll call the question. Councillor Hunt, your video isn't on. Are you still there, or? I understand you were having some technical problems.
I'm here, but it was given some bad green flashes, so I turned off the video.
Yeah, the green flashes were irritating, so if you have to turn them off again, we understand.
Motion. The motion carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Secoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Sless, Martin, McCreary, Hunt, Carpenter, and Samwell.
Any other changes? Seeing none.
Is this the point where we might have a go at referring this back to the board?
It is. Would you like to make that motion?
I would, and I'd be looking to a seconder.
That's disappointing. I was going to vote in favor of sending this back because some of the unmet needs were not discussed individually when the budget was passed at the Police Services Board. I was looking forward to a chance to review that, but we don't have a seconder, so.
Well, if you'd like to second it, I'll take the chair over for you.
Okay.
All right. So you're passing the chair over.
Second that.
All right. So could you please state what the resolution is? The mover, please.
That the police services budget for 2023 be referred back to the Brantford Police Services Board for reconsideration.
Okay. And that's seconded by yourself?
Yeah, I second that because I'm looking forward to a chance to have another look at this. I don't feel it was done properly in the first place. There was a group of unmet needs that were lumped together and voted on without being discussed separately. So I'll be supporting the motion on the floor.
And if I can just remind me, you're currently the chair of the Police Service Board?
That's correct.
Any further discussion? Yes, Councillor Sless.
Yeah, we can't cross I don't want to cross debate, but I wanted to get clarity if I could, Mr. Mayor, or Mr. Chair. I'm hearing that all of the unmet needs, is it the view to review them to add them in, or is it to review to take them out?
Can I clarify that?
Yes, you can clarify it.
Currently, they're all in. They were voted in, some of them in a block instead of dealing with them individually. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
All right, any further discussion? Yes, Councillor Carpenter.
Yes, despite the difficulty of getting a seconder and then having to have a little debate about how we get a seconder and then moving the chair. And then we finally get a seconder to review something, if the unmet needs were in a block, separating the question is always in order. And I'm sure it would have been in order at that time too. I'm not in favor of sending this back at the point just because one member of the board was unsatisfactory and the results that he or she didn't get. So I'm not going to vote to send this back at this point because one member is unsatisfied. And I think the whole process to get this on the floor was a concern for me.
Any further discussion? Yes, Councillor McCurry.
Thank you, Acting Chair Mayor Davis. So what I'm seeing is, and I did ask a number of questions today, and I got some good response. What I'm seeing is we do have some additional officer time that's going to be attributed through this budget to provide some more adequate and more effective policing, which is what the board is charged with, and that's what we support financially here at the Corporation of the City of Brantford. And I do support the rest of the budget, but I agree with what Councillor Martin has indicated that what we're looking at here in terms of the unmet needs is 7 administrative staff. We're going to find out Wednesday what the total overstrength component is going to be of additional officers on the street that are actually going to be working hard to address some of the community policing priorities, as well as supporting some of the major investigations that we get involved in, thanks to the mayor's entreaty, welcoming folks of all corporate opportunities to come to Brantford and make their way. But I do take issue with hiring 7 administrative staff in 1 year. And I think if I don't have any problem supporting the spending limits that we've got, but I do take a bit of an issue of providing back office staff when $700 and some odd thousand would certainly fund a number of officers on the street. Thank you. Mr. Acting Chair.
Yeah, I just say that I can support the resolution, a little bit of reluctance because preferably if you're referring something back to the Police Services Board, you like to add in what it is you're referring it back to be looked at. By commentary in addition to the actual wording of the resolution understands the unmet needs. I think through my own questioning, I think I indicated I had some concerns. And as well, that so much of this is administrative unmet needs rather than boots on the ground. And also some concern whether there are the metrics in place to ensure that especially when it's admin staff measuring the productivity and the fact that they're contributing to making the service more efficient, which I think is the goal. So I'm content to support the resolution, understanding that the board would then take a look at this and deal with it and may just send it right back to us as is, or may decide that there is a need for further adjustment. And frankly, there's nothing wrong with, we're at an very early part of our operating budget. I assume the Police Service Board is probably meeting in a week or two, next week.
This Thursday.
All right. So the timing seems to work well and can be done within our current operating budget review timeframe. So any further comment? Seeing none? Oh, sorry. Councilor
Mayor, the act does say that we are not supposed to cherry pick items of the budget. But if the chair seems to think that that might be appropriate, I would be happy to amend the referral to speak simply to unmet needs, which was my intention.
You accepting that? Seconder?
Well, if I was still chair, I would say that's out of order. That's not council's ability to do in this case.
So you're raising that as a point of, so you're not supporting it then as a seconder?
I still second the resolution. He can't make the change to direct it to the unmet needs.
All right, so the resolution has not been amended. It's as you presented it originally because it has, your seconder has not accepted that. So any further debate or discussion? Seeing none, if we could take the vote, please.
The motion to refer back to the Police Services Board, the entire budget carries on a recorded vote of 7-3. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Sakoli, Sullivan, Sless, Martin, McCreary, and Samuel. Those opposed, Councillors Carpenter, Hunt, and Caputo.
Assuming you're passing the chair back, Mr. Mayor?
Indeed, I am.
With that, there's been very little change. I don't think there's a need to go through the numbers again. So.
Yeah, that's correct. No changes tonight. So starting point is the ending point.
Wonderful. Thank you. With that, we are now recessed until Wednesday, February 8th at 4:30.